Mr. Speaker, the Maintenance of Racial Harmony Bill seeks to address the complexities of race relations in Singapore. It introduces measures to regulate racial discourse, counter foreign interference, and strengthen community cohesion. However, it is important this bill fosters racial harmony without unintentionally stifling essential public discourse and silencing marginalized voices. Racial harmony is a cornerstone of our society, and I think we all agree that it cannot be achieved through legislation alone. Enduring racial harmony requires genuine understanding and open dialogue among all communities. However, the broad ministerial powers under this bill risk deterring legitimate public discourse that is essential for fostering intercommunal dialogue and strengthen social cohesion. For instance, public critiques of systemic discrimination or policies affecting certain racial groups could be misconstrued as vilifying or denigrating others, even when the intent is to raise awareness or advocate for positive change. Forums discussing global events like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or domestic policies such as CECA, the Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement, could risk being labeled as racially inflammatory despite their role in constructive discourse. It is important to distinguish between speech that, on one hand, incites hatred and violence, which should be prevented, and speech which fosters understanding and calls out racial inequalities, which we should encourage. Constructive conversations, including in public forums, are necessary for addressing racial issues and strengthening intercommunal trust. While the bill includes defenses for private communication and calling out racism in good faith, individuals may still be uncertain about their practical application. The need to prove good faith intent or the private nature of a conversation could create hesitation to engage in discussions on race. This uncertainty may discourage open dialogue and cause such conversations to go underground or in the echo chambers within the internet. Since legislative intent, as expressed during this debate, may be referenced by the courts, could the Minister clarify with specific examples the type of speech, including the ones I raised, that will or will not fall within the scope of this legislation? I note that unlike the Maintenance of Religious Harmony Act, which explicitly prohibits the mixing of religion and politics, this bill does not contain a similar prohibition on the mixing of race and politics. Can the Minister confirm then that members of the public can engage in public discussion on racial issues without an outright legal prohibition? Foreign influence corporations can exploit racial and communal fault lines, destabilizing our society and undermining social cohesion. Countering foreign interference is a necessary component of maintaining racial harmony. The ability to monitor and regulate race-based entities and take action against harmful external influences is an important step in protecting Singapore's racial harmony and national security, and I acknowledge the government's efforts in addressing this issue. The bill introduces measures such as designating entities and issuing restraining orders. The Workers' Party supports the inclusion of these provisions. It is important, however, that these powers are exercised judiciously, with transparency and accountability to maintain public trust. Ensuring that decisions are seen as fair and impartial will be crucial to the effectiveness and legitimacy of these measures. I support the introduction of the Community Remedial Program, which offers an alternative to prosecution by encouraging participants to reflect on their actions and fostering rehabilitation. To be effective, the program should engage participants in meaningful dialogue with members of other racial groups, allowing for deeper understanding and reflection on the impact of their actions. Could the Minister share more details on the structure and content of the CRP? How will its effectiveness be measured to ensure it leads to genuine rehabilitation and behavioral change? So, unlike the Maintenance of Religious Harmony Act in 1990, this bill did not undergo the same level of parliamentary scrutiny through a select committee. Instead, the Government Feedback Unit, REACH, conducted a public consultation last year, but the feedback collected remains largely opaque, with only summarized data shared publicly. A select committee provides a more transparent and rigorous process, allowing for more in-depth scrutiny, public engagement, and expert input, particularly from minority communities most affected by such legislation. The government's Forward Singapore report underscores the need to strengthen our social compact through deeper citizen engagement. Yet, for an issue as fundamental as race relations, bypassing the select committee process weakens participatory democracy. A strong democratic system requires more than just electoral participation. It must also ensure meaningful avenues for policy-making input, robust public consultations, and rigorous legislative scrutiny. The government should uphold these principles by ensuring that future legislation of similar significance is subject to the full scrutiny of a select committee. Mr. Speaker, the Workers' Party supports the Maintenance of Religious Harmony Bill, particularly measures to counter foreign interference, but we urge the government to ensure that safeguards are in place to protect civil liberties and encourage open conversations about race. Thank you.
I thank members for their interventions, and it is really gratifying to see that there is unanimous agreement on the need for the bill. There's some questions, some concerns, and I do note the Workers' Party's position that they will support the bill but not the constitutional amendment because they have specific concerns about the President having the power to disagree with the minister. I'll deal with that separately. Now, let me start with perhaps some of the misconceptions that underlies some of the questions raised. And so, if I may deal with Mr. Gerald Giam's points, he expressed, as I see it, two main concerns. One, that genuine dialogue will be curtailed, and he gave examples of CECA and the Palestinian issue and so on. And he also said that since this is such an important bill, it really ought to have been sent to select committee like the MRHA. I appreciate his comments, but I think there is some serious misconception on what this bill does or is intended to cover. And I would refer members to Annex 1 in the press release of the Ministry of Home Affairs. And hopefully that will help in responding to Mr. Giam's comments, Ms. Phua's comments, and also some of the others who expressed some concerns. First of all, paragraph 3, the second sentence. The scope of unacceptable conduct regarding race relations will remain substantively the same as today. There is, in fact, no change in the law. And if you look at paragraph 12, the substantive provisions, scope of the offenses, because paragraph 11 sets out what is being brought over from the penal code. Paragraph 12 says the scope of the offenses under the bill is substantially the same as what is covered in the penal code. Some updates will be made to align the language and defenses under the bill with the equivalent provisions. So the changes are that we actually provided for some additional defenses and, in fact, narrowed one of the provisions. So if you look at section 298, 298A, 98A of the Penal Code, and then you look at clauses 39 and 40 of the bill, they're the same. So as I understand from Mr. Giam's speech, he accepts today there are no constraints. I mean, there are no unacceptable constraints on discussing on CECA, Palestinian issues, and so on. 298 and 298A have been enforced for 17 years. If no concerns have been expressed until now, I'm at a slight loss. What is the additional concern with clauses 39 and 40? And up to today, I'm not aware of any concerns expressed in Parliament about 298 or 298A of the Penal Code, or any suggestion that they should be repealed. And the Penal Code has been debated a number of times on various occasions in Parliament. I mean, the point perhaps was picked up by Ms. Chandradas, because she did say, yes, the provisions are the same, but since we are coming back to Parliament, perhaps we can re-debate it or debate it anew. But that's a different point. What is new is really the Presidential Council for Racial and Religious Harmony, the additional power to issue restraint orders, and of course the CRI, additional remedial orders. But they are process related. The fundamental power has got a, as you would see, Clause 8 relates to issuing of restraint orders. If you look at the provisions, they go back essentially to clauses 39 and 40. So I think there is a degree of misconception which then leads to concerns. For the same reason, therefore, the substantive law remains the same with the addition of some processes. Then I think you can understand why we don't need a select committee, particularly as those additional provisions, restraint orders, the Presidential Council, the CRI, these are modeled after the MRHA. Yeah. Mr. Giam also asked about members of public and can they engage in racial politics. The answer is they can continue to do, after this bill is passed, what they've been doing until now. I will just say, have a care on racial politics. If you get to the line of inciting violence, anything along those lines, which 298A and 298 deal with, then you could be transgressing the law. Yeah. I would add one more point, because this is such a fundamental misconception that we don't want to unduly alarm the public. And I know sometimes speeches are made really with the purpose of the public in mind. I'm not suggesting that Mr. Giam or anyone else has made such a speech, but it's sometimes made tailored for putting out in social media. But I think all of us agree that we don't want the public to be misled. So I would suggest that if speeches are put out which could be misleading on their own, then some care should be taken to give the correct impression of the debate under the Parliamentary Proceedings Act and the correct impression of the bill as clarified by me.